What's up, y'all? Sparta here. For this video, I'm going to be doing my Cyberpunk 2077 review. You're going to see gameplay points that don't necessarily correspond with what I'm saying, but that's mainly due to just how I decided to do the video. So whenever something comes up and you don't see it necessarily reflected in the gameplay, when it eventually ends up being reflected in the gameplay, just apply just keep that in mind and apply that accordingly. But without further ado, let's get into this by starting out how I feel about the overall state in the game and its history so far. It's pretty well known that the game was like basically unplayable on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One for a lot of people. People that I know, like a specific friend that I had, that he was the first one that bought the game when it came out, um, on PS4, played it on the PS4 Pro. He couldn't play it for more than like 10, 15 minutes at a time without it like crashing. But what he did say is that the times that he was actually able to play the game, he actually liked it. So that's something that should be taken into account, I suppose. It's pretty safe to say that that doesn't really happen now, at least not as often as it used to, and that is obviously a good thing. But just because a lot of people are buying it on Steam, the platform that it was always at least playable on, doesn't necessarily doesn't mean that it was always in this good state. There's this weird revisionist history that a lot of people, especially on Twitter, are trying to play, where this game was always good. People just decided to just oversell its jankness or whatever. And no, there was 2/3 of this game's audience couldn't play the game because it just didn't work on their platform. Or if it did work, it was a very choppy, very buggy experience. So even if they could experience it, I wouldn't say a buggy experience is the best way to go. Which really doesn't even really is beside the point, but not necessarily beside the point, but whatever. For me personally, I didn't encounter anything game breaking, honestly. I'm not going to sit here and lie about that. There were collision glitches, like there are times where even now a loot item can be can be stuck a little bit too far into the ground and I can't get it, or a gun could be stuck in between trash bags and I can't get it, or or enemies will be flipped to their side while taking cover, and you can still shoot them and hit them. That's not necessarily a problem. The moment you do that, they do pop back up, but it is indeed a problem. It's definitely jank. This is still what I used to call it a little bit, Cyberclunk 2077. But overall, is basically just lighting bugs and clipping issues. A couple T poses here and there, but not anything that I would say is like game breaking. I have played this game for like 51 hours. So it is indeed something that I haven't seen all that much. I also haven't had many issues with things like models, like more than one NPC model of the same, literally the same look popping in at the same time. There was like maybe one time where it went from like at the beginning of one block and at the end of the block that same NPC was up there. But that was pretty much it. I also haven't had any like spawning issues where if you turn around, oh, the game just decides to despawn all the characters behind you. That doesn't seem to happen all that much. It ultimately depends on how far I am, but it's honestly whatever. What I'm running this on though is an MSI GS76 Stealth with an RTX 3080 laptop GPU that has 16 gigabytes of VRAM and 32 gigabytes of RAM. So that's very nice. The 16 gigabytes of VRAM definitely does help me push this game to its limits. So that's actually very nice. And it's outputting to a LG Ultra Gear 1080p 240 hertz gaming monitor. And ultimately, I shouldn't have many issues, but honestly, some things do happen in terms of, say, frame rate drops here and there, but it's not that big of a deal. and it only really happens when I truly crank it up, like turn on ray tracing to its max and stuff like that, which I personally don't think you need in this game. Honestly, I think the baked in reflections are good enough, but it ultimately depends on how you feel. And I have the game basically maxed out on all the settings except for like four, which are like the shadow and reflection settings, which I just have on medium, and it works well. There's really no issue there. And I have DLSS on ultra performance mode, so that definitely does help getting some frames out of the overall game itself. Let me get into graphics and the overall fidelity of the game. Things like the face models are great, like the facial animations, the overall fidelity of the overall models is very good, but the face models in particular, especially since this is a first person game for the main characters, like say your Judy, your Rogue, your Panam, your River, your Claire, Johnny, all of them look good. Johnny looks a little bit iffy in certain lighting situations, but it's not the worst thing ever. It ultimately depends on the lighting. It's not terrible, but it's definitely something that I do want to bring up. But yeah, the characters are detailed. There's really nothing wrong with that. The overall city, like Night City, looks the best at night, which is apt due to its name. Um, the only problem I tend to have is when I'm outputting at 1080p, since my monitor is a 1080p monitor, and I go into the loadout slash inventory menu, and you'll see this a little bit later, or if you haven't seen it already, my the character model is pixelated. Like it's really weird. I don't know if that's because I have DLSS on or something like that, but when I turn it to 4K, it's a clear model. It's clean. There's really no issues there when it comes to that. But it does output at 60 FPS rather than like the 100 to 140s that it tends to output at, depending on where I'm at in the game. So that I do much rather prefer the frame rate. So I just tend to have it on 1080p. Although this isn't like some first person shoot, this isn't like some competitive first person shooter, so you don't necessarily have to worry about losing any sort of matches or whatever in terms of, say, refresh rate and being able to respond properly. So that's not that big of a deal, but for me personally, I just like how it feels. Um, let's talk about the gameplay here. The gameplay, in terms of like the combat, I feel is good. Especially the gunplay, I feel is really satisfying. I think the hand to hand fisticuffs, hickory hands combat is kind of eh. Like it's like you get like a few basic animations and that's it. Um, it's fleshed out enough, but I feel like for this first person RPG, there's not that much going on when it comes to the hand to hand combat, which is fine. I don't I don't have my character spec for that anyway. But when you do have the side jobs where you are doing the beat on the brat missions, where those are the things that you have to do, it becomes apparent that it becomes kind of tedious and repetitive to just see the same animations over and over. But it's whatever. It's not honestly not that big of a deal. It's just something I've noticed after 51 hours in the game. And you'll probably notice it even earlier, especially if you decide to go with the hand to hand combat route. When you have the Baraka Chop Chop blades, though, and you get those, those are very satisfying to use. But it's also just the same, like, basic animation. You have your left and right, you know, left and right chop, and then you have a heavy cross slash, like a Wolverine esque cross slash, and that's very satisfying. It's very satisfying to do that, especially the finishing animation when you have an enemy at low health. It does feel very good to do, but it's just something that I want to bring up is that animations feel very off. You'll see it when I do indeed show it off. The shadow animations are very stiff. There's also an issue where still your character is bald your character shadow is bald despite you having hair, and that just doesn't really make any sort of sense to me. But overall, it's not that big of a deal. It's just something I want to bring up because it's something that you'll notice if you care about looking at the shadows like that. And it is nice to see that you do get rendered legs. That's something that a lot of FPSs don't do. For example, Doom Eternal and Doom 2016, two of my favorite games ever. They don't render Doom Slayer's legs at all. So that's just something that you're gonna have to deal with, I guess. Um, I do feel like that is a lot of what it has to offer. It's basically guns, hand to hand combat, which I like the melee, which I just comprise of the hand to hand combat and the blades, which can also not just be arm blades that come out of your arm, but like katanas, swords, and whatnot. It could also be that. So the more you utilize certain weapons, the more you level up handguns, rifles, etc., blades. You'll end up leveling it up like that. Melee, the more you use your hand-to-hand combat, the more you will have more perks to put into that that system and able to get the best possible loadout for you personally. And that's what I really like about this game is that you can play this game in various different ways, from sneaking to sneaking and hacking to a mixture of all of it. It's actually very nice. But depending on how you decide to spec out your character, one thing is definitely a couple things are definitely going to be better than other things, and that's how it goes in RPGs, right? So you're just gonna have to keep that in mind when you do decide to spec out your character. But you could also decide to respec your character, like reset all the perk points and respec your character to a different spec if you want to do a different kind of playthrough mid playthrough. You can indeed do that. I really do like that a lot. Other games that claim to be RPGs like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I haven't played but I've watched a very extensive critique of, doesn't allow you to do that. So that's just something that's very nice in this game. It gives the player more choice in terms of how they want to go about their playthrough as V in the in the setting of Night City. So that's actually very nice. Sneaking feels good. It's first person sneaking, really no problems there. I didn't put that much into it, and able to get more stuff into sneaking, you have to put you have to put points in um the cool tree, which I just don't have leveled up really. So that's just something I never really did. But yeah, gunplay feels nice and satisfying, especially when you get the right guns. Grenades feel nice and satisfying as well. The overall gameplay loop feels good. I really don't have any sort of issues with that personally. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but it definitely feels like they did a good job with polishing things like the gunplay. Like I said, the melee can be a little bit better, but overall, it's not that big of a deal. It does feel good enough, and honestly, that's fine. Um, the driving is where I feel this game is a little bit iffy. There are there are a lot of different kind of cars in this game, which is very nice, and different cars have different handling. Some cars feel very hefty, some feel loose. Trucks tend to feel very heavy as well, which is very nice. You get cars in the Badlands, you get more desert focused cars. They're definitely better for traversing out there. Um, but I do feel like when they give you these super fast cars that are very flashy and look nice, the problem that I have is that you go a little bit too fast, ooh, you go a little bit too loose, and it sometimes it takes a little bit to brake properly to make sure you don't crash it, which isn't that big of a deal because if you do crash it, you could just leave your vehicles anywhere on the map, and even when you exit the game and come back to it later, they will be wherever you put them on the map. And when you do decide to call them back to you, um, when you do decide to call them back to you, they come back unscathed. So that's very nice. You're also gonna, but if they get destroyed, say, and if you do a police chase, which I don't know how you do that with how the police pursue you in this game. Um, you just call the car yet again, and you'll just have to pay some eddies, the in game currency. Don't worry, there's no microtransactions in this. It is a single player game, but you pay the eddies, the euro dollars, and it'll bring you a brand new version of that vehicle. So that's actually very nice. And you can spawn as many of your vehicles call as many of your vehicles to you as you want. There were some issues. There was like one issue where I called like four vehicles at once, and then one wouldn't come, but then it just randomly spawned on top of another vehicle. That was something that happened, but no one is really doing that kind of stuff anyway. Whenever somebody picks one vehicle, that's the one they tend to pick. And the vehicles I tend to stick with in this game are the motorcycles. I feel like they feel the best for me personally. I don't know what it is. With these open world games, I just tend to like how the motorcycles feel far better than the cars. Obviously, the cars are more flashy, but in terms of, say, how I feel about the driving in particular, I just I just decided to buy one of these bikes from one of the fixers in the game, which is one of the people that you get side missions from, and the Yaiba Kusanagi, and I really haven't went back since. There are also cars that you could find around the world as well, like for certain side missions that tend to be the exclamation mark in a circle. You'll find some vehicles that way, but most vehicles you get, aside from say, uh, there are a couple you get from side missions. There's a couple that you can there are quite a few that you can just buy, and there's obviously the stock car that you start with. Um and the stock car is fine. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. That's where I definitely had the issues with the steering and the controlling of the cars, but overall I do feel like that's totally fine. It ultimately depends on how you feel about the driving yourself. For me personally, I don't love it, but it definitely gets the job done. It's definitely not back in the Xbox 360 days of like Saints Row 2 stiff, but it definitely gets the job done overall. And yeah, really no problems there. Aside from the fact that I just don't overall like the steering. But let's get into the story. The story of this game is interesting to say the least, but overall I feel it's good. It's not the best thing ever, but we'll get into it here real quick. There are going to be spoilers here, so just keep that in mind. Um, it comprises of you getting a daemon from a, which is very funny because that's my name, from a job that which is like a cyber chip with Johnny's consciousness on it. It was actually a prototype, and that was basically meant to where people could live through their consciousness could be passed on through this chip. That's basically what it is, and you get it from a job, and it's the job that ja- Jackie dies fairly early in the game. It's actually kind of weird, but Jackie dies. He gives you the chip, the daemon, and that's where you get things like that's where you start getting these not hallucinations, but Johnny coming in to chime in on things in terms of like the story, and that starts to happen after you basically get killed in the game, but you come back to life, and then Johnny is the one that allows you to basically come back to life because he's trying to take over your body and become whole again, but you wake up, and then the basic grunt of the story comes through where you're trying to figure out how to get this chip out of you without it killing you. And that's basically what's going on throughout the entire story. Um, before I get into how I feel about the overall choices they give you, the feel of it, and all this stuff, I want to get into how I feel about things like the life paths and the side missions and all this stuff as well. So, well, I'll get into the side missions after I get to the main story. But the life paths basically give you a different starting hour for either Nomad, Street Kid, or Corpo. I started off with the Street Kid life path because I just felt like that was the most natural. Corpo feels the second most natural. Nomad feels a little bit stilted. It feels a little bit off, especially with how you meet Jackie and how he just decides to become your friend, even though he was literally about to backstab you. um, it's odd, but it's whatever. Um, they basically start off with a different life path. The different life paths start off with a different starting hour or two, which eventually always gets you to the mission where you get the daemon from how's I say Johnny Jackie, and the only real differences that you get throughout the game are like very few instances where you get different choices depending on the life path. Like it'll say street kid under like a certain like dialogue choice and things like that. That's basically what you get. And those are just unique options that they give you. It's nice, but I overall don't necessarily feel as if it's the most fleshed out part of the game. I wish they did a little bit more with it, which they were probably planning on doing more with they definitely were, because I remember that in the marketing. They were like, this will change person, how each and every person that plays the game plays their version of V or whatever the hell they said. I don't remember. It's been so long, but yeah, they basically pitched it as something that was bigger than it actually is. Not that big of a deal. I don't necessarily have that much of an issue with it, but I do wish it added more to the story other than you being kind of you being a kind of prick in one thing. Either way, you're just a different kind of prick. Like when you're a corpo prick. You're a street kid, you're a street kid prick. Badlands is probably one where I'm not really sure, but you're not that much of a prick with Nomad. But I said Badlands, but Nomad. But Street Kid feels the most natural for me personally. Um, let's talk about the side quests and why I feel like they're the best part of the game. um, this is kind of something that comes from The Witcher 3. The Witcher 3, which is obviously their last game, the the game that made everybody overhyped about this game, right? Because The Witcher 3 is a really good game. I'm not gonna sit here and lie about that. But they put a lot of time into the choices that you make within these side stories. And I'm calling them side stories, not side quests, because they definitely feel like their own contained stories and not just, oh, go here and do this, go here and do that, and they don't have any sort of consequences on your relationship with these characters. They have consequences with these characters, and that's very nice. Like, depending on how you decide to talk within a mission in terms of conversations and stuff, you can literally end a mission early, or if you just decide, fuck it, I'm in one particular mission, you could just decide to kill all the characters in that altercation, and you know what'll happen? You'll not get that mission again. You'll not get anything corresponding with that mission, and that's very nice. Or you can keep going, and depending on how good you do in the conversation leading up to this restaurant part of the mission, it may progress further into the mission. I personally was never able to get it farther than the restaurant, but that's just something that you're gonna happen. That's just something that happens, and I really do enjoy and appreciate what CD Projekt Red does in terms of their story structure with their side quests in particular. They feel the most fleshed out for me personally. Uh, um, Another example is River Ward, a detective that you help trying to figure out where his nephew is. Um, you can mess up and make it to where a lot of the people that you're trying to rescue from this particular place where his nephew was at dies, or depending on how you decide to go throughout the mission, you can save the vast majority of those NPCs that are locked up within that area, and that's really nice. That's really nice choice right there. I really do like how they play with choices in terms of the side quests here, and it really feels like they put a lot of attention and care into those side missions in particular. Not that they didn't in the main story. I just wish that those kind of things would happen in the main story more because it just feels way more dynamic. It feels like your choices matter. And that's something that's just very nice. There are also a few romance options in the game. You can have Pan Am, which is everybody's favorite, apparently. Nothing against Pan Am personally, but Judy is my personal favorite. You could have Judy, River Ward, as I literally just brought up. You could also have Rogue, which I think I messed up. And that's just basically you allowing Johnny to take over your body because that was a previous fling of his. And you basically get this very cute side mission with her where you break into a like a drive-in theater and you watch a movie with her. And I don't know if I messed up, but she ended up walking away and basically was like, "This doesn't feel right," which I understand, but it's just something that I do think was kind of a cute mission, and it was actually a nice touch. It actually made me like Rogue a little bit more. I felt like she was a little bit too much of the "I'm a badass" kind of chick. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something I definitely do want to bring up. Another character that's very good that I like a lot that I kind of don't like that you can't romance her is Claire. Um, and how they handle her and her situation is very nice as well. Where they don't make it a big deal that she is a transgender person. It's like she basically just drops it at like at the end of the second to last mission. She drops it and basically was like, after I transitioned, boom, and that's where like, oh, she's a transgender person. I didn't know that. I feel like that's how you personally should handle it, not just not just sit here and make it this big deal. Oh, I'm gay. Oh, I'm a transgender person. Oh, I'm all this other stuff. This is all I have. She has a personality that's very distinct. And once you start putting stuff together based on how she walks, how she overall is in terms of like other things, she is definitely one of the characters I end up liking the most. One of the characters I like the most out of this game, and that's very nice. That's very nice. It would have been nice to be able to romance her, but it's whatever. It's not that big of a deal. I understand why they would want to do that because a part of her story is that she misses her husband, and while her mission chain is a bunch of races, which I don't like I said, I don't really like the driving in this game all that much, especially since the best way to drive in this game is with her truck, and trucks don't control the best in this game. It definitely feels it definitely is worth it to get the story out of her, and that's actually very nice. Judy, like I said, is the one I stuck with. I never got Pan Am's relationship thing. I don't know what I did wrong there. I'll probably try to do that in a second playthrough and see how I can do it. But Judy was the one. She was the one that struck me from the beginning. So I was like, I'm really gonna incentivize like romancing her, and I did, and it's great. Um, her mission chain is like definitely one of the strongest. Definitely one of the strongest. And you're not tied to just romancing one person. Um, which is kind of weird. But the romancing basically just comes down to having sex with them anyway. But what's nice about the Judy thing is that when they do, when they do the romance thing, she gives you the key. She gives you the code to her apartment, so it's basically a second apartment for you, and that's actually pretty nice. That's a nice touch. The problem that I tend to have with the main story is that they don't necessarily flesh out the relationship with Johnny and V all that much. That tends to happen. That tends to happen a little bit more in the side story between V and Johnny, where that is where they flesh out all that stuff more. And when Johnny eventually comes in and chimes in on specific missions, like there was this mission where you're trying to figure out if this guy's wife is cheating on him because he suspects she's cheating on him because the kid that they just have looked nothing like any of them, right? And you go to the mission, and Johnny's playing this very detective like role, where it's like this noir detective type thing, and how they make Keanu do a little bit more different things is actually nice because basically he just plays himself in a lot of stuff, but how they allowed him to be a little bit more. He's a little bit more gruff in this game compared to say in this performance compared to like other performances, like even like John Wick. But in terms of that mission, it was actually very fun, and I really did like that a lot. And seeing their relationship grow was actually one of the highlights of the game that I wish they did a little bit more in the story itself. But and it would probably give me more of an impact with the final decisions that you make in the game as well. But that's not that big of that's ultimately up to the player itself and how they feel about it. Um, I do want to talk about the main mission, the final choices that you make, and how it does, how people basically say your choices don't matter because player choice definitely matters in a game like definitely should matter in a game like this, right? I understand where people are coming from. But I feel far too many people are sitting here and saying that the game doesn't have the game doesn't give you any agency or the choices in the game don't matter or any all this other stuff. And what I don't understand is that the main reasoning that they're saying this is because no matter what ending choice you make, you die. You could either choose to off yourself before the final mission, where you storm Arasaka Tower yet again, or you could choose to storm Arasaka Tower, and you have multiple choices there as well that also end in you dying. So people just see that and say, "Oh, you die either way, so what's even the point?" The point is, and I'm not trying to sit here and say you just don't understand it, bro, because that's stupid. This game isn't that deep. This game isn't like I'm not gonna treat this like Snyder Cut fans treat the Snyderverse fans treat the Zack Snyder DCEU movies. But what I'm gonna say is the choices definitely make an impact on the characters that you encounter throughout the game. Like, say if you decide to off yourself pre the Arasaka Tower storming, right? Well, you don't storm it; you do just go in there, basically. Um, what happens there is characters will be sad and they'll think you just stopped talking to them and then don't even know that you actually killed yourself. That's something that's not I wouldn't say interesting, but it's a different way to approach that kind of thing. Whereas you can break it to them in other ways that you're not going to be living long, and you could either choose to end once you come back to the world in this Arasaka choice that you make at the end, where you basically go into a space station, and they keep you there for months, and then you start losing your mind, and they eventually break it to you that you have 6 months to live. That's when the end credits roll, and people are like, "Glad to see you coming back. We missed you," and all that stuff, and that's actually pretty nice. I do like that quite a bit. Um, but I do understand where people come from. There could have been a way. There could have been some sort of way where you play the game fast enough that you are able to successfully get the daemon out of out of the back of your head and be able to keep your consciousness and also maintain Johnny as well. But it might be solely because they wanted to have, I don't know, they wanted to do something different. And I can understand that. I'm not trying to sit here and say that that's a good or bad thing, but it's definitely something that I feel has more credence than just it's bad because you don't have choice and your choice doesn't matter. That just really doesn't make any sense to me personally. But it's whatever. Let's talk about the side content now. And by side content, I mean like the events that happen in the world, the little mini encounters you have, and all this stuff. And yeah, um, getting out of that meaty chunk, which is the story. Let's different events will pop up on the map, like say gang activities, corrupt NCPD or Militech people doing stuff behind the scenes that you end up busting, and all this other stuff. Though those things definitely do happen. There is other missions you get from those. I would call side missions because they don't really have any sort of overarching story. But what happens is what happens is that you start progressing through it, and it's either this thing of you go into this bar and you shoot it up and kill everybody in it. You go into this base, shoot everybody up, and shoot everyone and kill everyone in it. You sneak into this place and you steal this thing. You clear this place out. You do all this. Like, it's basically the same thing every single time. And obviously, you can choose what you decide to do. If you're doing more of a sneaky build, you can indeed sneak in to more places, and just especially when the mission is steal to steal something, you can definitely go in and go stealthy and really have no problem. But due to the fact that that's not how my play style ended up being, that's just not what happened with me personally. So that's just something that I did want to bring up. The side content is decent. It's not the best thing in the world. A lot of things feel tacked on, especially when in the first like hour or two of the game, there's like this five, like maybe 5 minute spread of like literally everybody calling you and saying, "Hey, look, come at me for missions. Hey, look, come at me for missions. Hey, look, come at me for missions. Hey, look, I got some cars for you. Here, this and that and this and that." And that's just basically what happens there. Another thing is that yes, you buy cars. The problem is you have to buy them from the fixers yourself, and you also can't do something like steal cars. Like you can't hack a car and make it yours or something like that. Something that Watch Dogs 2 does. You can't do anything like that at all. And there's kind of like some lost potential there that would have been very nice to see. You being able to just break into a car, like, or take a car from someone out of the street, hack into it, make it yours so that you can call it whenever you want to. What basically happens is that you could take the cars, but sorry, you may be hearing my dog in the background. But you could take a car, make it, you can't take a car and make it yours. You could take a car, drive it somewhere, but the moment that you decide to spawn out of the map or like exit the game or whatever, or it reloads or something, that car is gone. So it's not like GTA where it has some sort of garage system that you have. There's none of that in the sort in the game, and I really hope the moment that they do add multiplayer, they add some sort of garage system, because this game can literally be a future first person GTA 5, GTA Online type of experience, and that would be very cool. That would be very cool if they did something like that. But they would also have to rejigger their mission structures and have varying missions as well. So we'll see ultimately what that does. But yeah, you can do stuff like assist the NCPD. You have this you have this person. God, I forget her name. That you, how do I forget her name? Regina. You have this woman named Regina that is trying to crack down on like cyber psychosis, right? And what you basically do is go around and try to find cyber psychos so that and not kill them, which is not hard to do actually. You can still shoot someone up so much, but then they'll still just be knocked out. All you have to do is not overkill them, and which is not a mechanic in the game, but not like say they're down and you just see them like rolling around. You don't shoot them again, and you'll basically be good there. But overall, that's another one that I feel is pretty damn good. There's also other things where you get a gun called Skippy, and do not choose the deadly mode, because you do that and you go back to the you do that go back to and you like kill, I think it's like 50 people or something like that. It'll put you into the safe mode where it just kneecaps people. So what I would advise you do is go into the safe mode first, have it be grueling, suffer through that for 50 kills, and then it'll switch you to the deadly mode. And that's where that gun really shines. It's one of the best guns in the game, apparently, and that's very nice. But you go a little bit farther in the game, do a little bit more with it, play a few more hours with it. The game is like, Skippy is like, I've figured out who my original owner was, and it happens to be Regina. And what you can do is, you can either decide to actually return Skippy or don't. If you decide to not return Skippy, the problem is that every time you shoot and kill someone, it was like bad user, stuff like that. But if you just say yes, say you're gonna return Skippy, but then you just don't do that, you'll not have that problem. Because I don't necessarily see like returning Skippy is that big of a deal, mainly because you only get like 7,000 eddies from Regina out of that. I don't necessarily think that's a big bounty for me personally, big enough. Like it was, if it was 10,000, maybe, but 7,000 is like, eh. Especially with how flush with cash you can get in that game, pretty easily. So overall, Skippy is a very good gun. There's also this side mission or side event that you go to, like this Patriot rally. They're called this. It's on 666th Street or whatever the hell, and you do this game where you shoot at shoot at. I think it's either the mayor or the NCPD warden or whatever. You shoot at like 12. Shoot at 12 of his picture with a revolver, and you got to do it within 12 seconds. And the moment you do that, guess what? You can get this. You can get this gun called Divided We Stand, which is an automatic machine gun, SMG, which is actually a very nice gun. But what happens then is that this dude recognizes you, just like, hey, he's the one that he or she's the one that shot at us, and then they decide to try and kill you, and you just kill them, and there you go. Or you can just kill them before that mission starts, and you can take the gun then. But yeah, it's some of the side content, it varies from being very interesting and actually pretty nice to like, it's fine. A lot of it tends to be busy work, but there are the few gems like the one I just talked about where I was like, they actually put some time into that. That's very nice. But there's a lot of it that does indeed feel a little bit tacked on. Like you got to find these tarot card, these like this graffiti throughout the world for Misty, that turn into tarot cards, and that's a little bit busy work. They do just show up on the map in like a blue card, so you can just track them. So it's not like, oh, I gotta sit here and just literally find them without any sort of indication as to where they are. No, they put them on the map, which is nice. But it is indeed something that feels a little bit busy work. If you do like the loop of the game, the overall game loop, I don't know why I said that twice. Um, this game can be fun, and you can indeed play it for 51 plus hours, like I did. And I personally don't have a problem with the gunplay or anything like that. It ultimately depends on how you try to play the game. But if you don't like the game loop, you're not gonna like the game, and you're not gonna like the fact that the side content is very repetitive. Keep in mind that every game is fucking repetitive, but you're not gonna get out of that. Like, I love fighting games. Fighting games are the epitome of repetition, and this game definitely gets repetitive. That's kind of the stigma of open world games, right? It just depends on how much fun you're having with the game. And that's what matters. And how you decide to approach missions, that really does matter. And this game definitely does a good job at giving you multiple choices um, throughout stuff like that. Let me talk about my other gripes and nitpicks with the game. Like I said, melee combat kind of feels half baked with the fists. You only get a few basic animations. It does feel good enough, but it's not like the best. And the auto tracking when it comes to like knocking people down can indeed mess with your aim, and it can mess with you also getting hit, especially with these beat on the brat side missions, which kind of is I don't, which kind of is bad, and I don't like that really. But it depends on how you spec your character. You might do better. Since I didn't spec my character to be a brawler, I don't. I basically have to rely on heavy attacks and dodging. So that's basically what you got to do there. Like I said, driving can be better. That's something that I definitely feel like cars can either have. Certain cars can have a little more weight. Certain cars can be a little bit more loose. But overall, I'll probably just stick with my main, the Yaiba Kusanagi motorcycle, because I really do like that a lot. It very much looks like the Akira motorcycle, which is why I like it. The gangs really don't do anything aside from Maelstrom and the Aldecados. The Aldecados is where you meet Panam. The Maelstrom is like one of the first gangs you encounter in the game that have one of the things that have an optional side thing that you can do to approach the mission differently, which is very nice. But those are basically the only two gangs that really matter in the game. Those are the only two that matter. Um, which does suck. Games like Saints Row 2 do a far better job at making it seem like the gangs have an impact on the world, which I know that is a gang centric game, but since CD Projekt Red brought up the fact that this is a game that that's gonna have the gangs be a little bit more impactful, I don't necessarily feel like it is, and that does kind of suck. Um, Story specific gear can't be deconstructed or even put in your stash, which you find in your apartment. I really don't like that. You get Johnny's glasses and you get Johnny's replica samurai jacket, right? And you can't either deconstruct them or put them in your stash whatsoever. And it's very inconsistent because you could deconstruct or put Johnny's gun in your stash, and you can deconstruct Panam's sniper. You can deconstruct the gun that you get from the shotgun that you get from Judy, but those specific items you can't do anything with. I don't understand that at all. That just really doesn't make any sort of sense with me. Um, Again, no multiplayer in the game. Honestly, that's fine due to the state of the game still not being up to snuff. Polish it a little bit more, and then we'll talk about multiplayer. Cops don't pursue you pretty much at all. They basically just spawn on the map, and you could just drive in a straight line and get away from them, no problem. That wouldn't necessarily be a problem for me since I don't sit here and try to cause GTA level chaos in Cyberpunk at all, really. But there also been random times where they just randomly aggro on me as well. But since I've also been playing Watch Dogs 2 a little bit, where that cop AI is very aggressive. Like it's probably the most aggressive I've seen. Like, and I played GTA. I played all the GTA's, so I know this. I have experience with this. Watch Dogs 2 cop AI is like OD. Like, man. But yeah, the comparison is just night and day between that. Same with something like Sleeping Dogs. I feel like the cop AI in there is a little bit better as well. They do indeed pursue you, but there are other ways that you can get rid of the cops and sleeping dogs as well, such as ram them in cars and stuff like that. But yeah, I also wish that there were more variations with the male and female voices in V. I wish there were multiple like cadences and different female and male voice actors. I understand. I'm trying to understand why, or what the hell? I sorry, I got a message. I can understand why they didn't do it. Having one voice actor for each definitely does make it to where the voice acting is the most consistent. I can understand that, and both voice actors do a very good job. But in terms of making it feel like your V, that's just something that I feel like they could have done a little bit better. Again, not that big of a deal, but it's something that I do indeed want to bring up. Sorry, I got a call, and I honestly forgot what I was talking about. But let me look here real quick. Oh yeah, the variations between the voices would be nice. That's something that's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's something that I do feel could indeed be better. Other things, while there are a lot of characters that do indeed spawn, the problem with that is I feel um, too many tend to spawn to the point where a lot of there are NPCs that just like walk on top of objects to get to where they're going. That's something that's very weird. But it's not that big of a deal. It's just like a minor thing. But it's something that you do indeed notice at times when you look for it. And since I did see it and notice it, it's just something I wanted to bring up. Let's talk about my overall feel on this game now, because it is indeed important to talk about this. Don't go in expecting the greatest RPG of all time to end all others. That's just not what you're going to get when it comes to this game. The overall design of the game in Night City is nice, and it's a far cry from from at launch where the NPCs would just always pop in, stuff like that, which doesn't really happen anymore. It happens every now and again, but not that big of a deal. Other issues like the character model and the shadows being, having a bald V and the shadow being a little bit stiff. That's stuff that happens still. T poses and stuff like that definitely do happen. But again, just minor bugs for me personally. It'll ultimately vary on your system and what you decide to play this on. But for me, I just haven't had that big of a deal. And it hasn't like severely overheated my PC or anything drastic like that. So that's just something that you're gonna have to deal with. Story is serviceable. The relationship between V and Johnny does grow beyond them just hating each other and being dicks to one another. Keanu does a very good job, and he sounds like he's putting a little bit more effort into it rather than just being yet another Keanu Reeves role. And the couple of side missions that there are that allow him to stretch that out and have him have some fun is definitely nice, especially since he didn't seem to have that much fun in the new Matrix movie. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. The game is fun and a good time. I can see myself putting more hours into it on subsequent playthroughs. I'd recommend it if you have a system that can push the clunkiness of the game a little bit farther to the side, but I wouldn't necessarily say this is the magnum opus of CD Projekt Red. I feel like The Witcher 3 is definitely the better game out of the two. And that's not to sit here and say that The Witcher 3 is perfect. The Witcher 3 still has its problems. But compared to this, compared to this, um, where it was literally taken off the PlayStation Store, Yeah, people were refunded from Sony, which very rarely happens. This was a big thing, and I know a lot of people want to sit here and say Sony kept Life of Black Tiger up, but they took they took Cyberpunk down. There's a distinct difference between Cyberpunk 2077 and The Life of Black Tiger. One is a AAA game. The other is made by some shitty some shitty shovelware studio. There's a there's a clear difference between the magnitude of people that are going to buy Cyberpunk 2077 and Life of Black Tiger. Most people that bought that game buy it for the lulz. People that bought Cyberpunk initially bought it because they wanted to get a game. They wanted to see if the game came out as promised, and clearly it didn't. So don't sit here and come with this revisionist history of the game where it's it's the best game ever. It's so great. It was perfect when it came out. Like, stop that, because it's just not true. For a lot of players that bought this game, again, 2/3 of the player base, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, that stayed on base PS4 and base Xbox One, that didn't even go to Xbox One X or PS4 Pro. Even people that went to those two had problems. But those who stayed on the base consoles, guess what? The game couldn't be played for long. And if it did, it was running at like 10, 15 frames per second. That's not playable. Like, I'm sorry. Even people that sit here and claim, oh, I can't see frame rate, or I can't feel the difference between 15 and 60 frames per second. First off, you're a fucking liar. Like, you can't tell the difference? That doesn't sound right. Believe me, at one point I was the same way. But then I was blessed. I was I was enlightened in the ways of higher frame rates. So what people really need to stop doing is blindly defending this game. I understand when people are just saying the game is bad to say it's bad. The game isn't like dog shit. The game isn't terrible. It has its problems. But the what you really need to sit here and do, fans of this game, you have to sit here and evaluate what exactly people are saying, what makes the game bad to them. A game not performing when they get it, when they pay 60 or even $70 for it, even more in certain countries, yes, that can constitute the game as being bad or dog shit. It's not just this thing of, oh, you just watched Critical's stream of it, or you just listened to Kotaku or IGN or all these other places, which gave it decent reviews because they played this PC version, though. But when the console reviews came out, that's something that really did paint the game in a certain light for certain people. Because, like it or not, more people play on console. A lot of people play on console. I'm not gonna say more people, but a lot of people play on console. It was 2/3 of their player base that they kind of shafted. So to sit here and act as if this game was flawless when it came out, when it really wasn't. It wasn't just minor bugs. For you, it may have been minor bugs. And hell, I got this game a year later. Guess what? This is where I'd say, yeah, there are minor bugs, but it's playable and it runs smoothly and it barely drops frames. When it does, it's like very rare. And as if I crank everything the hell up. But it's not as simple as people just want to hate the game because it was overhyped. There are plenty of games that hold that title. Or people just want to hate it because it was overhyped. Or people just want to hate it because it wasn't the game they wanted. Marvel's Avengers is one of those games where the game is both like overpraised and overhated at the same time. Like Marvel versus Capcom Infinite, same deal. That game was overpraised and overhated. It was mostly overhated, and the few people that decided to praise it and actually say they really liked the game were called shills, or they were being inauthentic, or they were not seeing the issues. Like Maximilian, dude, a person that literally says it's his favorite. I think he says it's his favorite playing Marvel vs. Capcom title to date. Like he likes how that game feels the most. It's just marred by a terrible look, bad roster, a bad story, which you don't have to play, but it's a very bad story. And it's just like people overhate games and people overlove games. I don't feel like this game was overhate. A lot of people, when I was watching people like Moist Critical stream, this was like, when this game actually functions on the platform I want to play it on, I'll get it. But this is just something that just doesn't work. You know, that just doesn't make sense. You know, missions that initially didn't boot for other people, or that would stay in a soft lock or hard lock for certain people, or that would crash, didn't crash for me. And that's all I can say. Like the initial storm on Arasaka Tower with Johnny, that played smoothly and it played fine. Didn't have any sort of issues with it whatsoever. But I do feel like this entire notion of revising exactly how this game, the impact that this game had in terms of, say, the company itself and the perception of the game, it definitely does suck, because there's a good game in here, but it still has its problems. That's all I'm gonna say on that, man. This is Sparta. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for support. This was a long one. Hope you guys have a wonderful Monday, or whatever time of day it is in your area. Like the video if you like it. Share with people that are interested in sort of content, and dislike it, even though if you dislike it, even though I'm not gonna see it. My next review on games is probably gonna be Assassin's Creed Origins. That game is really good. And as a longtime Assassin's Creed fan, I'm really glad I decided to jump into this game, because it's a really fun time. But yeah, hope you guys have a good one.
Rip that tongue out. Come on. Hand over the rifle.
Over. Rotten meat. Get her! Here we go! Watch out! Here I come! Had enough of this shit! Medic! Losing soldiers here!
Fun fact, bloodstains can be removed using one easy trick and vinegar.
The NCPD advises those traveling beyond official police jurisdiction to wear bulletproof vests